What's up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. Alright, today's video, I wanted to talk about something that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time now, and a lot of you are fans of the channel know that I'm a huge fan of Tokusatsu, which is, for those that don't know, that's Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, shows that if you're not familiar with, you may be familiar with their more famous American counterparts. That would be the Power Rangers and Masked Rider, respectively. Though I'm less a fan of Masked Rider. And in 2021, Kyle Higgins and Marcelo Costa released Radiant Black #1, a comic that is basically everything that I have ever wanted in terms of Super Sentai and Kamen Rider style themes in an American comic. So I figured, why not talk about it? So without standing on ceremony, I'm gonna explain Radiant Black.
You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
So, Radiant Black by Kyle Higgins and Marcelo Costa is a story about a guy by the name of Nathan Burnett, who is probably one of the most relatable characters in the history of relatable characters. He's an aspiring film writer who just had to move back in with his parents due to struggling to make ends meet and being crushed by student loan debt. The guy literally starts his journey in the comics as a rideshare driver who is so bogged down in money problems that he's in tears. Dude is almost too relatable. But he does manage to luck up when hanging out with his best and seemingly only friend, Marshall. They stumble upon a miniature black hole that just appears directly in front of Marshall. When Nathan reaches out to it, the black hole latches onto him, dragging him closer and enveloping him in what can only be described as a living singularity, turning him into the Tokusatsu-inspired Radiant Black. The Radiant works different for each person who wields it, but for this video, I'm specifically talking about Radiant Black, whose special ability is to control gravity. There are 3 other Radiants that we are aware of, but I'm not going to be talking about them in this issue. I'll probably do another video later on down the road, or if people are even care or want to see that, I'll do another video breaking down each of those other characters. But while operating as Radiant Black, Nathan can control gravity, whether it's his own personal gravity, which he typically uses to stop himself from falling or allowing him to make extremely high jumps or even fly, or he can manipulate other people's gravity, making them float or throwing them through the air as far away as dozens of feet. His ability to manipulate gravity is strong enough he can even lift a moving car or even something as heavy as a moving train, as well as its 6 coupled train cars in the air effortlessly. And this was even when he first got his powers and didn't even know how to use them. He can also unleash the energy of a singularity in the form of a concussive blast, powerful enough to break steel. This force energy is powerful enough to also strip the Radiant off any other Radiant user if they're caught within a sustained blast. As Radiant Black, Nathan becomes a superpowered human draped in a Kamen Rider / Super Sentai style armor that protects him from just about any and all harm, but also allows him to feel everything almost as if the armor was more of a second skin than anything else. The armor is nearly completely impenetrable, but Nathan can actually expel things from himself without removing any piece of it. Case in point, when he first got his powers, he was able to vomit without removing his helmet, almost as if the helmet phased the vomit through itself. This is likely a nod to all the memes and criticism that people have had, especially over the decades since Super Sentai and the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers series came out. And a lot of this is specifically levied at characters like Tommy, the Green Ranger, if you're talking about Power Rangers, or Burai, if you're talking about the Super Sentai series, Z-Ranger. Both characters could play a flute despite wearing a helmet that literally covers their mouth. Now, while I did say the armor is incredibly powerful, the absolute limit of that armor seems to be having an entire 3-story building collapse on top of him. During Radiant Black #4, this happened when Nathan was fighting against Radiant Red, and though the armor wasn't able to fully protect him, it did keep the building from outright killing him, but putting him in a coma that lasted for months instead. Now, regardless of whoever is wielding Radiant Black, there does seem to be a correlation between one's emotional state and how powerful or effective they can use the Radiant Black power set. As we have seen over the course of the series, that the more angry or emotionally unstable a character becomes when using it, they could become powerful enough to even outclass someone who's more skilled in using the Radiant than they are. We've seen this with Radiant Black when used by Marshall, who used the power of the Radiant in ways Nathan had yet to, despite only having it for a single day. His anger at Nathan being put in a coma made him powerful enough to come closer to defeating Radiant Red than Nathan had been up to that point. Another neat trick up the Radiant Black sleeve is the existence of the Radiant that hides within him, an entity that is still mysterious even by Radiant Black issue number 17. This entity, the Radiant, is a living biomechanical being that exists in a realm outside of time and space, able to live within the Radiant host. In this case, either Nathan or Marshall. And while they largely keep quiet, they occasionally reach out to their host and communicate, mostly speaking in broken sentences and giving double meanings, sometimes hinting at a darker narrative depending on the situation. We've rarely seen the entity doing anything other than talk, but occasionally it has stepped in to help Radiant Black when absolutely necessary. It's helped save Marshall from 001, a powerful alien that's very familiar with the Radiant, by reaching a giant robotic arm out of Marshall's chest and snatching 001 into the Radiant. It's also transported both Nathan and Marshall to the Helix, the realm between time and space where the Radiant lives, even at times when not teleporting either of them would result in death. The power of the Radiant also grants various forms, with Radiant Black learning that they have a more powerful version of their armor that comes complete with the cape. But fashion isn't the only power-up with this one. They become a more powerful being, able to wield more abilities that are still unclear even now. But what is important is knowing that this alternate form is way more powerful with the cape than without it. And even in death, the Radiant has the power to bring a person back to life, as evidenced when Marshall cut a deal with the Radiant to bring Nathan back to life, because at the time, the only thing keeping Nathan alive was life support. Radiant Black is very much a love letter to Tokusatsu, the genre of television and film that you primarily find in Japan, though you do find versions of it in other countries and even here in the United States. But for those who do not know, Tokusatsu is a Japanese term that essentially means special filming. It's basically any television show or movie that has a very high abundance of special effects. This also includes things like Godzilla and Gamera, as well as Ultraman and so on and so forth. But the shows that popularized the genre, at least over here stateside, things like Super Sentai and Kamen Rider, footage from those shows was what was used to create the first season of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers almost 30 years ago in 1993, and all of its subsequent seasons right up to this very day. Even in the case of naming conventions, the series follows the same naming conventions as Super Sentai, with Radiant Black being named so because his costume is mostly black with a white trim, while the other characters who wield the Radiant are named after their respective colors as well, with Satomi being Radiant Red, Wendell being Radiant Yellow, and Eva being Radiant Pink. And if that weren't enough of a love letter to Super Sentai, in Radiant Black number 7, when the Radiants are teleported to Japan, a random passerby asks which Sentai team that they are from. There's even a nod to Power Rangers itself, where the character Marshall, while Nathan was still Radiant Black, tried to come up with a logo for Nathan's superhero persona, and one of the many names he comes up with starts with Mighty Morphin, before scrapping the idea altogether because he recognized they would get sued. This means that both Super Sentai and Power Rangers exist in the Radiant Black universe. There's also a reference to the character The Darkness. This was a character that existed under the Top Cow imprint at Image Comics from back in the late 90s and early 2000s, so there's that as well. I love this character, I love this story, I love this comic. It's actually one of my favorite comics, and if you are a channel member or patron, you have probably seen me recommend this comic almost every week that it has come out since issue number 1. It almost regularly appears on the top 5 comics of the week anytime there's a new issue, so yeah, I'm a huge fan of this. Not only that, but I feel like Tokusatsu has gotten a resurgence here in the United States, with Power Rangers kind of reaching a new level of popularity that I think it hasn't seen since the early to mid 90s, but also the fact that we've seen other comics that have come out recently, things like Ultra Mega or Jenny Zero, comics like that are focusing on Tokusatsu elements, and honestly, I love to see it. If you want to know more about Tokusatsu, I actually have a video breaking down exactly what Tokusatsu is in more granular detail, so check that video out up here. And if you want to know more about the major differences between Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and the show that started it all, Kyoryu Sentai Z Ranger, check out this video down here. In the meantime, let me know what you think about Radiant Black. Keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.